Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Wednesday, the 20th of September, 2017. As you know, Maria made landfall in southeast Puerto Rico right near the crack of dawn this morning, right in here. And since then, the eye has decayed quite a bit, but it is still a formidable hurricane. Certainly the topography here and the mountains, etc., and the disruption that's causing to the core will weaken Maria quite a bit, but you can see the very strong banding still going on, and once the core moves out over the water here, it should start to reorganize itself. The wind field will probably expand more than it has, and this will start moving off to the northwest again and keeping that motion going, and pass to the north of the Dominican Republic in terms of a landfall. But very heavy rain will spread over this area, and then it's going to come pretty close to the extreme southeast part of the Bahamas, the Turks and the Caicos, and we're going to have to watch and see where it ends up from there. But today, a terrible day for Puerto Rico, and it's not just the wind and the storm surge. I'm going to show you some stuff in just a minute that's very, very unnerving. So this is the 5-day forecast track, and for the most part, this is going to go basically with the middle of the tightly clustered guidance envelope, and you can see that North Carolina here is almost within that northwest portion of the cone of uncertainty, as it's called often, and I do suspect that this will shift ever so slightly to the west with time as the models kind of figure out that Jose is not as big an influence as they thought. I mean, you think about it, this is the 5-day position here, and that's not a lot of distance to cover in that short amount of time, and a lot can happen up here with Jose and the very warm Atlantic building the ridge back in, and we're going to really start focusing on that more and more starting tomorrow once Maria has passed off of Puerto Rico, and we know that the next phase of the tracking of this system really does begin there. I figure it's going to be about another 48 hours until we know whether or not this is going to absolutely turn up and then go out. And I think that's going to be sort of a lock in terms of knowing that in about 48 hours. Or if we see that the evidence of more ridging sticking in here does even more so and brings this up on the western side of this envelope and allows it to cut across eastern North Carolina. Some of the modeling is indicating that as of now. So let's take a look at some of the areas that were impacted by Maria this morning. Again, it made landfall right through here in the southeast part of the U.S. territory. San Juan, being on the northern coast, stayed out of the eye, but the eye wall, the inner core, and the outer core all affected that area. And as I zoom in here, the really disturbing aspect to this, as you can see, even by this satellite picture here, you know, there's a lot of relief in here, as it's called. There's significant mountains and topography. You know, your coastal areas, of course, are going to have that coastal plain look. That's the same over here as these rivers wind their way down into the coastal plain, but the rest of this is just mountainous and tropical rainforest type terrain, and lots of beautiful river systems in there. And unfortunately, if we look at this, it's absolutely staggering. The river gauge down here absolutely just obliterating the record, which was 25.2 feet. And you can see that it just went absolutely crazy. And it's, you know, I think the last report here was 10:30 a.m. and it was almost 20 feet above the flood stage, the record. I mean, the flood stage, of course, starts down here, but the record, 25.2, unbelievable. And where is this located? If we scroll down, luckily the Weather Forecast Office shows you where this is. That's the gauge location, and you can see that you do have a considerable amount of population. It's not like nobody lives there. And if you zoom out, you get a better perspective here of where this is located in Puerto Rico. Let's screw this down just a little and see if this will work for me. Along the north central area of the island is where this is, and if we zoom out even farther or further, You can see what that is. You can see the river basins in here that live different tendrils as they spread out. And this is just one of many gauges. And it's just a real shame because there's probably going to be substantial loss of life and just unimaginable damage and complete villages wiped out. And when was that historic crest that was beat today? Well, that was September the 10th in 1996. And that might have been Hurricane Hortense, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look that up. But 1996 was erased from the record. Well, it's still there, but it was obliterated. Absolutely incredibly, 42 feet, and then it stopped reporting. So this is the next story down here. And I talked about that this would be an issue as equal to or greater than, in some cases, the wind. With the Category 5, the Category 4, a lot of emphasis placed on all the wind that was going to come through this area. But the flooding, the freshwater flooding from this rainfall is astounding. And it's not looking good. So the future of Maria, again, looking at the GFS ensembles from the 6Z run this morning, let me just zoom in over here, starting to get a few core members, whatever you want to call it, from the 19 or so. I think there's the operational and 19 ensemble members or something like that. Or maybe there's 20 ensemble members and the operational, so there's 21 total. Whatever. But you see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them out of 20, we can say, that bring it right up into the mid-Atlantic states. There's a couple more, so that's like 6. There's a few of them up here that are in eastern Massachusetts. So we're getting close to half of the ensemble members now impact the United States directly. There's one into Maine, for example. And we can nitpick this all day, but the bottom line is this is starting to shift west. And you can see, why is it doing that? Because the ridge is showing up stronger. And if it pushes back a little bit more and you shift this over just another 100 miles, then you're going to bring the core of Maria, what's left of it, up there, probably a big surge with it as well, into eastern North Carolina. It is not going to take much to do that. Florida, I don't see anything that suggests that this will impact Florida directly. There is not enough ridging building out over the Atlantic strong enough to force this to go into Florida. I don't see that happening. And at this point, I would pretty much bet my life on it. And so that's good news for you folks in Florida. And I would say the same for Georgia as well. And a lot of that, again, has to do with what's happening with Jose. And you can see that there's, the circulation in here, and it's got this trough extending down. And I just think that all of this is going to diminish and collapse and have less of an influence on the atmosphere. And then the ridge is able to build in, not only coming out from North America here, but also nosing in from the Atlantic, as these waters out here are quite warm and warmer than average in some cases. And that's going to allow Maria an opportunity to come up fairly close. And I think once we get to this juncture here in its time frame, it's either going to come up and then fade on out, or I think it'll come up and stay up and then turn out, something like that. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've seen this enough, and you see the signs and the changes in the tracks. I just was not convinced that 9 days out, the models were going to absolutely just not waver, and Maria was going to come up and do this track, and that was what it was going to be. A 9-day forecast that didn't waver much at all. I just don't buy it, especially after what happened with Irma, and last year with Matthew. The shifts were west and west, and we saw what happened. And so we'll see. Maybe the past helps you understand the future a little bit. Maybe it doesn't, but we'll be on top of it. All right, so this is the first update today. I'm going to do another one this evening, and I will go over the afternoon models at that point in time. And Maria will be back out over the water at that point as well, and we'll see how it starts to reorganize. All right, it has been a saga, a heck of a hurricane season. We have a long way to go, and there is indication now that the Western Caribbean should start to destabilize, and we get some convergence in there, and the building up of convective activity. In layman's terms, we need to start watching the Western Caribbean after about the 10-day time frame. And that fits into climatology. That's when we would normally start looking there, so nothing unusual about that. But heads up, because that's going to be the next place to watch. I'll cover that this afternoon or early evening as well. All right, that's it from me for now. I'm Mark Sept with HurricaneTrack.com. As always, thank you for tuning in. I'll have more for you late this afternoon or early evening.